Hello again. Following on from what I said a couple of days ago about the idea of Egypt being an ancient black culture and a black civilization, I thought I ought to mention a man called Imhotep. According to the ideas of Afrocentrism, civilization didn't arise in the Fertile Crescent and then spread out from there into Europe and Africa. They reversed the idea. The concept here is that civilization arose in Africa, and by civilization I mean things like philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, architecture. They arose in northeast Africa and then diffused from there into the Fertile Crescent and from the Fertile Crescent into Europe. A key figure in this alternative history is Imhotep, and he's very important for several reasons. Firstly, if the Afrocentric historians wish to claim that mathematics developed in Africa rather than the Fertile Crescent, they have to establish some sort of timeline for this. And the one they've chosen is in about 2700 BC. A black genius called Imhotep devised medicine, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, building in stone, all the things, all the elements of civilization that we associate with the Fertile Crescent. It's claimed that Imhotep was the origin of them, and that when these ideas reached the Fertile Crescent, they were wickedly claimed for other people. And the Babylonians then pretended that they had invented mathematics, whereas it was the Egyptians and so on. Here's a presentation put forward from a black history point of view. Now, we're told that he was the world's first documented multi-genius. I'm not even sure what that's supposed to mean. I don't know what a documented multi-genius is. He was an architect, doctor, astronomer and poet. As a doctor, he performed a variety of surgeries, and a medical document he authored is still studied to this day by medical students. These are all extraordinary claims. We'll look at them in a little while. He's made to sound like a combination of Leonardo da Vinci and Albert Einstein. What do we actually know about Imhotep? Might be a good place to begin. There are just two sources for our knowledge of Imhotep. Here's one of them. Imhotep lived almost 5,000 years ago, and this is an inscription on the base of a statue of a king called Djoser. It tells us that Imhotep was his chief minister, royal seal bearer, and also high priest at Heliopolis and director of sculptors and masons. The second source is much sparser than this. It's simply a piece of graffiti on a later building that mentions Imhotep's name and suggests that he was still alive at the time that the graffito was scribbled. So that's not much use. This is a sum total of what we actually know about Imhotep. It's rather a meagre amount of information on which to base the extravagant claims that we see all over the internet these days. Let's have a look at those claims and see where they come from. The first claim is that he was an architect. In about 2650 BC, the very first pyramid was built in Egypt. It was a crude affair. It was made of little limestone blocks like bricks. It was a prototype, if you like. This was intended to be the tomb of King Djoser, and Imhotep was mixed up in its construction somehow as chief minister. He had something to do with it as director of masons. Here's the pyramid at a place called Saqqara. We don't really know what Imhotep's role in this pyramid was. He might have been an architect. All we know is that in the brief inscription I showed you earlier, he's described as director of sculptors and masons. He might have been the architect, but that's by no means certain. Imagine, if you will, in 5,000 years' time, some archaeologist excavates a Victorian building in Britain, he's likely to find inscriptions, say a cornerstone, foundation stone, with all sorts of names on it. They're going to be members of the town council, alderman this, the mayor, clerk of works, all kinds of people. It doesn't mean to say that those people were actually involved in building the thing or that they were the architects. It's just what happens with old buildings. So we don't really know what Imhotep's role in the enterprise was. He might have been the architect. I mean, director of masons, he could even have been a foreman at the building site. Or it's possible he was in charge of recruiting labour or making arrangements for their living and so on. We really don't have any idea at all what connection Imhotep had with the pyramid at Saqqara. One of the claims made about that pyramid that we looked at can be dismissed at once. We saw it was built of little limestone bricks. It's been suggested that this is the first stone building in the world, or one of the first stone buildings, but that's absolutely ridiculous. Here's a stone building with a door and an internal staircase, which was constructed 4,000 years before the pyramid at Saqqara. It's in Jericho, not far from Jerusalem. What about the other wonderful claims made about genius of Imhotep? These didn't really begin until thousands of years after his death, which makes them very difficult to verify. That, simply, if I were to start thinking about things that happened 2,000 years ago and trying to analyse someone's character or achievements, I would find it very difficult without written sources. After his death, Imhotep was made into a god. He was deified. He became a god or a minor god. This was quite common in the ancient world. A lot of the Roman emperors became gods once they'd died. And once this happened in Egypt, it became possible to pray to a person, to pray to the newly appointed god, which of course is what happened to Imhotep. Over the course of time, he became the patron god of healers and physicians. There's no evidence at all that he was a physician himself, but I'm trying to think of a good parallel now. Perhaps the Catholic Church might be the best way of looking at this. Sometimes the Catholic Church will appoint saints. People have died, they become beatified, and then they become saints. And it's possible for ordinary people to pray to them. They address, not to worship them, they can address petitions to them. They can ask for healing, they can ask for illnesses to be healed. And the process is that the saint or supposed saint will speak to Our Lady, who in turn has a word with her son, and the matter is arranged in that way. And this isn't meant to be disrespectful of the Catholic Church at all. It's simply how it works. So we could speak to Pope John Paul II, who died some while ago, and ask him to heal our arthritis or cancer. And if we were successful, if we then got a result from that, other people might use him as a healer as well. This has happened with a number of Catholic saints. It doesn't mean that Pope John Paul was a doctor. It just means that a lot of people think they've got a result from praying to him. As a result of this, Imhotep became Egypt's patron saint of healing and physicians. The idea that Imhotep was a doctor in the modern sense is a very recent development. It didn't start until 1930. A man called James Breasted translated an ancient Egyptian papyrus that dealt with ways of helping people with injuries or curing illnesses. It dated from about 1,000 years after Imhotep's death, but because it looked as though it was something that had been copied several times, this is the Edwin Smith papyrus, by the way, if anyone wants to look it up. Breasted published his translation and mentioned quite in passing that perhaps it was written by Imhotep, who was the god of healing. He said that he had no evidence for thinking that, it was just speculation, but somehow that idea seized the public imagination in the 1930s. One possible reason is this: Breasted's idea appeared at about the same time as a Boris Karloff film, The Mummy, which of course features Imhotep in a starring role as the eponymous mummy. And it's possible that the film popularised the name of Imhotep, and that combined with what Breasted was saying, put it into people's minds that Imhotep might have been a doctor. All the other claims about Imhotep, as poet, philosopher, mathematician, astronomer, all the rest of it, they all date from thousands of years after his death, once his cult had taken off. It's only really since the end of the Second World War that people have been associating Imhotep with science and medicine and all these other things. There's no reason at all to think that he was anything particularly special. But at the moment, he's everywhere on the internet. He's become the black claim to the idea that Africans invented mathematics and medicine.